Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Well, I can see this is going to be a great show already.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 570 of the Dead Robot Society. I'm Terry Mixon, the guy that cannot speak English, welcoming you to our wonderful program. Joining me is Chortley Paul E. Cooley.
You also didn't give me a chance to realize you were going to do the real introductions. Now I look like an asshole. Thanks.
It's rough when you get caught being an asshole on tape.
It's rough when you can't speak.
I know. It's like, no, I cannot speak.
The sad part is I don't know whether to use that as the bumper or just leave that whole segment in there.
I leave it up to you, man. You can do whatever you like.
Oh, God.
You have complete creative control.
Oh, that's terrifying. Anyway, what's up?
It's just another day doing thing.
Doing things.
I'll eventually finish editing this damn book.
Uh-huh. Sure you will.
I'm almost done now. I'm down to a dozen chapters.
So have you been editing since last week, or do you have other stuff going on?
I did some editing, but not as much as I should have. I'll have it done by the time we have the next show.
Okay.
I promise. Cool. I'll have at least this pass done.
Yay. Glad somebody's getting shit done.
What about you, man? Not getting anything done? It sounds like you're getting a lot of things done. They're just not writing related.
They're not writing related, but yeah, I got a lot of shit done. That's not writing related. And we're going into the production this week, so for my other day job. And well, wait a minute. We got, well, I don't know. I haven't answered the call, so I don't know yet, but may have a trip coming up. And then, of course, I've been trying to get this other app in production that is not related to robots. So I've been a little busy, going crazy. But I keep trying to get back into the words, and I'm going to reward myself tonight with a little writing time.
Yay!
Everybody, do this for a while. It'll be perfect. That's my life.
I've got to get my editing on this book done because I have a short story due at the end of the month. So I've got a deadline to make that happen. Both of these things have to be done by the end of this month.
Mm-hmm.
Which will be a good thing because I am so ready to start writing the next book.
I'm so ready to get back to signal decay. I popped the cork on something and
now you can put the genie back in the bottle?
No. Now I have to deal with them running back in to try and figure out what to do next and then have the next shoe drop. So I want to get back there. I feel like I'm stuck. I've cliffhangered myself. It's like I'm right there. I'm right there. I need to know what happens next. Shit. Anyway, it's frustrating to say the least. But hopefully the madness will be over this month. Well, I'll have to be because I go to Hawaii in early March. My in-laws are taking everybody to Hawaii for their 50th wedding anniversary. So I'll be in it there while this product is going in production for a really, really big event here. So
what could possibly go wrong?
Fuck you. Anyway, have we introduced each other? Are we introduced now? We introduced ourselves and the writing and all that bullshit. We're ready to actually begin the show.
We're ready to start the show.
And what the hell's show is this?
We're going to start small this time. I want to take us from the word all the way out to the full story.
Oh, dear God, this is going to take a while.
It's like a big stepping stone. We start with one building block and we build the next and we put together a story from pieces parts. It's like building a Lego story.
Building a Lego story.
Sure.
All right. Well, let's see if it's Lego, Duplo, or whatever those cheap knockoff blocks are.
Ooh, Duplo. We've talked about this before. Quite literally, we have talked about this before.
Never happened. I have no idea what you're talking about.
But I want to talk about the building blocks of a story, starting from the smallest and working our way up.
Okay.
I want to take us from individual words all the way to a completed story.
Oh,
Talk about how.
God.
You act shocked now. We literally had an episode where we talked about this very subject.
Never
so
happened.
do not give me
Never
any
happened.
faux outrage.
Never happened. I have no idea what he's talking about. He's totally full of shit. Don't listen to him.
Well, just because I'm full of shit doesn't mean that we can't talk about it. I think being full of shit and talking about things is a positive, not a negative.
It might actually be absolutely necessary. I'm not sure you can split the two, actually, in our cases. I think they're kind of intermixed. They're kind of like the Siamese twin thing, and you can't really pull it apart without really bad things happening. Maybe.
And what are we talking about pulling apart again?
I don't know. Can we move on to whatever the fuck it was you wanted to talk about?
I don't know. I think the awkwardness of where you were going with this analogy may be even more fun than just starting the show.
Let's crawl through what Paul intended to say. I was talking about the two things being completely intermingled. You could not pull them apart.
And which two things are we talking about?
I don't remember.
Oh, that's awkward. I just trying to get to the point. There is no point.
There's no point whatsoever. So continue.
That's a huge letdown. So we're going to start the show with that.
Oh, I'm going to keep my self-deprecating humor. Go ahead. Continue.
We were talking just before we started the episode about my, somewhat mediocre word choice and imprecision. And I fully agree with that. I am one of those people that doesn't hone myself down looking for the exact right word for whatever situation. I'll settle for the word that's good enough. But I want to hear what your opinion is on word selection, since we're starting at the smallest element of building a story. Are you one of those people that just cannot help himself and just stares at a paragraph on the screen for minutes upon minutes going, that word is not what I want?
I can't really continue this conversation because I'm too busy laughing at all the commercials going on inside my head for Allstate or whatever it was, just good enough. Because I saw that right after my appendix surgery and was just kind of like, when I saw the guy, I was like, yep, that was the guy.
What would have been funny if that was on the screen, when you were waiting to go in, and have a doctor that looks like him come in and go, wait a minute now, hang on.
I was so stoned, I could have completely imagined it there. That was not a problem. All right, just good enough.
Guess who's got reinstated? Well,
not officially.
Not officially.
Are you scared? Yeah, me too. That's all right. We'll figure it out.
Why is that like me as a writer? I think that you are not quite the same.
I think that that's absolute bullshit. I think that you probably do sweat over words. You just don't realize you're even doing it. There are good enough for me is when it sounds right when I read it aloud. There are times when I'll realize that I've wandered around for 7 words trying to say what one word would have said. I've had that happen more than once where I'm like, why in the hell am I saying it this way? This is stupid. But that goes back to sentence construction. But a word is a word is a word. If it sounds wrong to me, I know it's the wrong word. Unless it's in dialogue, all freaking, don't even worry about it. There are no rules of dialogue. Not these kind of rules anyway. But it will sound wrong in my head, and that's usually a sign that it's the wrong word. That's usually the sign. But I do not look for the perfect word unless the word I have used sounds wrong when I go back and look at it.
I'm mocking myself, but you're absolutely right. I don't just settle for garbage words. I try to make it fit the dialogue that's going on, the narration that's going on.
Yeah.
And when it sounds right is exactly when I'm happy with it. there are times when I'll look at a word and go, that's not right. I need to whip out the thesaurus and figure out something else that may be a better word to look at it. And sometimes seeing a different word will make me rewrite the portion of the sentence with that in it because it'll fit better. It's all about the flow.
It's about the flow. It's just like in dialogue, I would never have a character say something that ran counter to the way they normally talk, unless there was a specific reason. Like they're faking being stupid, and then they start pulling out these $100 words. Whereas if people were paying attention, they were actually being kind of bright all along the time, just none of their companions get them. Then they might drop a word like obsequious. Yeah. You're not going to hear a whole lot of Marines, for instance, running around saying obsequious. It's just, it's not going to happen. You're probably not going to find many computer programmers throwing around the word obsequious. It's such an out of character word, unless it's from somebody who speaks like that with a lot of other things that could be said less elegantly or less concisely. So I will hunt for the perfect word in those cases.
Yes. Sometimes the word choice is important when you're trying to fit the dialogue to a specific person.
Right. When you're trying to make it relevant to the character and also carry along that characterization. You kind of have to be sort of in lockstep.
When you're doing, say, a military character, you're going to find that their conversation is somewhat different than your normal civilian. And it really depends on the situation you're in. I mean, just their general conversation is going to be a bit more earthy.
Yeah, small talk.
Well, I'm thinking curse words. It's going to be a bit more earthy when it comes to that. But when they're in a combat situation, things become a lot more terse and are filled with acronyms and other shorthand to get things across fast.
Acronyms and verbs.
Mm-hmm.
Acronyms and verbs. Don't screw around. Get it. Urgency is always implied. Extra urgency means, oh shit. Because you have to act, you have to communicate that way. You don't have time to parse, a Shakespearean monologue while you're trying to give somebody instructions on how not to kill themselves or get killed or how to kill the enemy. Yeah, it's not going to work.
No. I'm going to grab a book off my shelf that we did this last time. I'm going to do it again here.
Now, for crying out loud, here we go again. Well, I cut this piece.
And this is something that if you don't have it on your desk, you should have.
It's actually right there.
I know. I sent you a copy because I think it's a really cool thing to have. And for those of you listening in audio, it's called A Flick Dictionary by Barbara Ann Kipfer, PhD. And it's a great resource because it's not just looking for as a thesaurus for a specific word. Thesaurus.
Is that actually in the thesaurus? A thesaurus?
Maybe it's in the Lispsaurus.
Oh, all right. Continue.
But this particular book has things like phrases or objects. Like if you're looking for herbs, you can have a whole list of different herbs that it has right there on the page for you. It's a way to say, I've got a general idea, but I'm looking for something more specific. And it's a really great resource.
Yeah. I mean, I've used it more than once. So, and every once in a while, it's just kind of fun to flip it open and see what you find and go, what? Oh, yeah.
Well, we were talking about sentences. So words, we'll jump up to sentences next. Are you one of those people that you dissect your sentence looking for, all the appropriate matching verbs, nouns, adverbs, clauses, and so forth?
No.
Do we know anybody that actually is? Because, they really pound that into our heads when we're taking English class in high school. But I don't know very many writers that you follow that particular mantra.
3 different things, 4 different things.
Ooh.
Are you writing for journalism? Are you writing for an essay? Are you writing for nonfiction, or are you writing fiction?
Obviously, I'm the fiction guy, so maybe those other people use it. As a fiction writer, I'm not sure that I do.
4 very different things. Yeah, it's all that FMLA. You got to follow that. That was all that bullshit. like I said with the word, a sentence will sound right or wrong. And I won't know it necessarily until I go back and edit. There are times where I get done with a sentence and go, wait, that's not what I'm trying to say. And I'll go back and I'll kill that sentence and I'll try again. And there are times where it's taken me a while because I'm not sure how to say exactly what I want to say. And all this other stuff kind of depends on it. I have to kind of figure out what the hell it is that, what that is. And it may take a little moment on getting that sentence right, but that's usually also related to the next level up. So, but the sentence will either sound wrong or it'll sound right. And if it sounds wrong, then I've got something structurally, there's something structurally wrong that's striking my ear. And it's either too short, it's either too long, or it doesn't breathe in the right places, or the words are just not in the proper order for them to really make sense or carry across what I'm trying to do. It doesn't normally happen very often. And when it does, it's usually because I'm actually struggling with some other part. So it's usually a sign I need to stop and take a minute at what the hell I've done to myself. But no, I don't sit there and sweat over every sentence. If it sounds right, it's probably okay. Probably.
Beginning writers focus a lot on individual words and sentences. They put a lot of store in those things. And I think the English classes that we've taken and the advice that we get as beginning writers may lead into that particular myth.
I think it does, but I think you also need to remember that most people never got really past writing the 5-paragraph essay. So if you don't read, you don't get it, because it's a completely different type of flow. You're trying to accomplish different things. You're trying to disseminate information in a different way, a different fashion. It's much more sensory. It's much more descriptive. It's not about just saying words. It's about how you say them and whether or not they've carried that flow into something. And if you go look at the brilliant essay writers that are out there, there are a lot of them. They use all those mechanisms of fiction in their essays. And that's one of the reasons why people like to read what they write, is because they're good at nonfiction, because they tell a story. They are writing a nonfiction book, but they are still a narrator. Even if the narrator every once in a while has to back up what he said with information. That's, it's just going to happen. And that's the way you learn how to write. How would you talk to somebody? But it's a little more formal than that.
It is. I think that when you're telling a story, it's important not to get lost inside the forest and only see the trees. You've got to keep your eye on the big picture.
Yeah, it really is a mix of the two different things. And I think that is why some folks struggle so hard with trying to write in general, is because I think they do get caught up on the rules. They think that they're afraid to put down words because they won't match, and nobody tells them and nobody explains to them that what they really should be doing is playing with one of those poetry boards where you get all the you just get all the words and you have to put them together to make a poem. That will teach you more about sentence structure than probably any English class ever could. Because again, it will sound right or it will sound wrong.
I think one of the things that poisoned me in English classes in high school, and poisoned is the wrong word, maybe set me against the formal English structure, was that my favorite teacher in the year that I had the first set of English classes was a monstrously good storyteller. He was one of those people that if we set up things just right, we could spend the class listening to him tell stories as opposed to going through whatever the lesson plan was.
Wow, I had college profs like that.
And he was an extremely entertaining storyteller. And I got excellent grades in English, even though I loathe dissecting sentences and other things. Cannot stand that kind of thing. But he was there to help me foster myself as a reader, because that's what I was at the time. And I think that's important to keep in mind, that English doesn't have to be a dry mausoleum where stories go to die.
I almost flunked out of English in middle school because I could not wrap my head around diagramming sentences. I didn't get it. I just did not get it.
Sounds like me in algebra.
Well, that was that. And in retrospect, that was the same fucking problem, because diagramming sentences is algebra. It's math. There is math back there lurking in the shadows.
I hate you. I hate math, and so now I hate you for ruining English for me.
I didn't get any of that stuff until after I took an introductory course on Boolean logic in college, and then everything snapped together, and that's why I was able to do programming as well.
It took me 3 tries to get through college algebra, because I'm being honest there. I literally failed to make the grade and had to withdraw from algebra 2 separate times, because I could not wrap my head around the fact that when you're looking for a variable, it could be any number. I'm like, it's math. You're supposed to be able to figure out what the frick number it is. This is bullshit.
Yes, you see, this means you didn't get the abstraction. You only got the concrete.
Exactly. And then the third algebra teacher explained it in a way that I was finally able to understand the concepts for it. And I got A's that semester. So obviously it had to be focused so that my brain could accept the information. And English may be the same way for people. It doesn't have to be this utterly horrible, terrible thing for storytelling. It can be the foundation of being a great storyteller, as long as you don't get yourself lost in the weeds.
Yeah, you shouldn't get lost in the rules. And if you break the rules, that's fine, but you need to know what they are.
That's exactly right.
Otherwise, you end up writing gibberish. So you don't feel like you're completely constrained by the rules. But if you're breaking them, you need to, number one, know that you're breaking them. Number two, have a good reason for breaking them.
Be like Deadpool. Break the fourth wall, but do it right.
Yeah, do it right. Do it in the right sense. So that was sentences.
Paragraphs. Do your paragraphs have to serve a purpose? Do they have to be a certain minimum length, certain maximum length? Please, God, tell me you don't have any 4-page paragraphs.
Oh God, no. Last time we got into this, I believe I told him about the 40-page sentence that William Faulkner wrote for part 2 of The Bear, or whatever the hell it was. I still can't remember exactly what the order was. I'm too lazy to go look it up. But anyway, every English student's nightmare.
Hold my beer is what Faulkner said.
It is dissecting that mofo and trying to basically determine whether or not it's a run-on. Because I was not aware of this in 1986, but evidently there's this huge bunch of nutcases who all they want to do is argue about whether or not it is a grammatically correct sentence. So
I think that is a horrible sort of thing to have as your passion. I think you should try to solve who Jack the Ripper was, because that's much more entertaining than trying to figure out if this one sentence is really a run-on sentence. That is horrible.
Anyway, leave that alone. So a 4-page paragraph, right? My rule of thumb, and I can't remember where this comes from, is 3 sentences to a paragraph. A paragraph must have at least 3 sentences. Now, that was for FMLA, MFLA, whatever that shit was. That was for those kinds of essays, right? So they beat that into your head, and I'm still following the goddamn thing. But you had to have at least 3 sentences per paragraph. In fiction? No. But I still have a rule of 3. It's usually, if I want to talk about something, I don't want to just hit it once with 1 sentence and move on. There's a couple of things I guess I try and do, and I don't know why. But I think one is to kind of give a general description. Another is to kind of give an idea of what the character thinks about it without going into those terms. And then third is kind of a transition to the next paragraph.
That's way more organized than I am. I look at my paragraph length as I'm editing it, and I can see if it's too long. If it's more than 3 or 4 lines, I'll find a place to break it up.
Mhm.
And I reserve the one-liners for rim shots, basically.
Yeah, rim shots are those moments where you just want to basically cover one specific thought from the character as the narrator.
So I typically don't. If I see a paragraph that only occupies 2 lines on my screen, I start going, can I combine that with the next one?
Yeah.
Can I add a little bit more to it?
Yeah.
If I start seeing where I've got 4 or 5 lines in this paragraph, I'm like, I'm starting to look for a place where I can break that up.
Yeah,
Unless it's combat, unless that it's fast and furious action, in which case I'll accept slightly shorter paragraphs.
I'll accept a lot shorter paragraphs in action.
And I'll accept, we should have mentioned that in sentences too. Your sentences tend to be shorter as well in action beats.
Yeah, if you want suspense, you can kind of layer shorter to longer and then kind of cut it right back. And that's just one of those stupid little tricks that you can use.
Mm-hmm. So it's the same sort of thing with paragraphs. So we're not too far off the boat covering it.
No, not at all. Not at all. But paragraphs, like you said, with the choppiness, as long as it doesn't feel like a wall of text, and the best way to discover that, in my humble opinion, is to put your screen at half size and read it. And see if it feels like a wall of text. Because you'll get the idea as you swipe or whatever else across your screen to get to the next page that you can actually see. You'll understand that after a couple of those pages, has become a wall of text.
In a way, that's sort of like the rule of 3.
Yeah.
If you list items, you can't really go beyond 3 without having the reader lose one of the ones in the middle. There's only like
why you put all the unimportant ones.
Exactly. That's a mystery thing. If you want to hide something, you bury it in a list.
Yep.
So that nobody will see it.
If you're a real dick, you put it in the middle when they're
But yeah, if you look at a big chunk of text, people are going to get halfway through it and then skip it. It's just one of those things. I found myself doing it even in a story that I'm liking. If the wall of text is impenetrable, I skip it and I go on. I'll figure out what it was trying to say later.
Yeah, or just scan it for, all right, the important bit has to be at the end of the sentence, right?
So don't make a wall of text, and you'll know what it is. You're a reader. You can figure this part out.
And, it doesn't have to be, you break it up with something. Usually it's like, if you're getting into the walls of text and you have a character lying around who's doing something, show us doing something as breaks. Find natural breaks in the wall of text and give us an action beat. Give us something human, something sentient, something we're watching, whatever. Were you going to ask?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was just scratching my eyebrow.
Okay.
Which is totally different than asking something.
When I wrote The Black, the lanternfish was that. The lanternfish is used as a tool so I can inform the reader about what the hell habitat we're talking about. And I can see it through the lanternfish's eyes, and I can integrate scientific facts about this without turning it into the wall of text. And it works. It worked. Anyway, people seem to be pretty satisfied with it. It's a good trick to learn. I didn't invent that. That is, if you go looking in science fiction, you go looking in thrillers, you are going to find this trick everywhere. Whenever they're talking or trying to explain something to themselves or a vital research fact, if the book is written well, this kind of thing will be there. There. So saith the Paul.
Preach it, brother. One of the things that I found that I do as a writer is the first draft, I am just putting the story out in its very roughest format. Whether I'm narrating it or dictating it rather, whether I'm sitting at the screen, whether I'm typing at it, it doesn't matter. It's fast and furious getting out the beats of the story. When I come back through in the next editing pass, I'm adding in sensory detail. I'm adding in the bits and pieces of interior thought that I may have missed on the way through. And I'm finding the sentences that didn't work and cutting them out or rewording them. So you don't have to get this right on the first try.
Don't expect to.
Don't fall into the perfection trap. That's not going to happen. We can't see the quality of our own work, and we shouldn't try. That's my basic opinion. You write the best story that you can and let someone else tell you if it's any good or not.
And if you're always, I mean, editors have, their job is to help you with that when you need help with it. And if you're sweating over every sentence and paragraph and you've been doing this for a while, there may be something you need to drastically change, unless that's just your process to write the stuff, not worry about run-on sentences, just like Terry was saying, get it out as quickly as possible. And there are lots of writers who do that. And then they go back and they fix it.
Mm-hmm. I have lots of sentences that are a bit long that I end up finding places to break them.
Right. But if you do that, you have to be very disciplined in editing. So
that's why editing feels like work.
That's why editing feels like work. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. And yet some people, that's their favorite part. There are times when it's my favorite part because I go, oh, I missed that. Oh, you know what? I could go fill this piece with that piece. And yeah, because I'm a sadist.
The first editing pass is not my favorite part because I'm having to change all the bits and pieces. When I make the second editing pass, that's usually places where I'm going to end up changing a word here or there, and it's a lot more enjoyable that second read through.
Yeah, because it's more or less you're trying to look at the finished product, but still the self-loathing will eventually creep in. We're just like, I do not want to read this page again. I'm so sick of it.
That's why I only read them twice.
I wish I could only read them once.
I don't do 17 drafts.
No, I don't do 17 drafts either. That's gone. That's no more. No mas. Adios. No.
No one has time to do 17 drafts.
No thanks.
And if here's a clue for you, folks, if you go through doing just an inordinate number of drafts, you're going to take your own voice right out of that story.
Ultimately,
there is something about writing the story as it comes out, flow of consciousness for you, that injects your own voice into the story. Don't take it out.
Again, difference between different types of writing.
I only speak about fiction writing. That is my wheelhouse.
Well, you're also speaking about nonfiction.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
I totally am not.
Yes, you are.
Some of what I say may be applicable to writing nonfiction.
Absolutely.
But I absolutely, when I'm thinking of what to say on the show and what to do, I am absolutely thinking as a fiction writer.
I understand that. I think what I was getting at is the fact that most of these things do apply.
If you write something different than fiction, consider what we say, but don't take it as gospel.
Shit, you shouldn't take anything we say as gospel.
We don't.
Until proven wrong, we do. But
hey, by the way, Paul, once we're done with this, we're doing the intro for the next show. Remind me to go ahead and tell you about the utterly horrible things I am doing in the draft that I am currently writing.
Okay, I'll try and not remember that.
You'll love it. You will absolutely freaking love it.
I promise I won't remember that because time will have passed by then.
Well, we'll see. Next, we're going to jump up to the scenes.
The scene.
What's the purpose of a scene, Paul?
I think my answer last time was much wittier.
It's too bad we can't cut and paste.
Oh God, you wouldn't want that audio. A scene is basically a container for a set number of related actions or a set number of related what's he call them? Sequels.
Mm-hmm.
Basically say, and that was Jim Butcher speak. Ugh. You have the scene where the stuff happens, and then you would have the sequel where the character or whatever ruminates about the actions that in the previous scene. That's Jim Butcher's scene and sequel. The scene where you're talking about could be really either. You can have all the action beats that are the main driving force, or you have a series of related things that are related. That they basically process that pertain to the action in the previous sequence. They're clear as mud.
I can agree with that, but I think it might be more clear to say that a scene is a mini arc.
All right.
Whereas your novel is, one large story arc. Your scene has its own discrete beginning, middle, and end.
It's a micro arc.
It's a micro arc. That'll work too. Mini arc, micro arc, whatever.
Yes, because
whatever
we're going to
works
get
for
to
you.
macro arcs. So
Don't think I'm not going to make a note to talk about, secondary plot lines to talk about later.
oh God, that's a whole nother episode. Anyway, continue.
It is. That's what I'm talking about. I'm literally making a note right now so that we can have an episode on that.
Oh God, the torture, the horror.
When I'm writing a scene, the biggest thing for me is getting a decent idea of where the scene is going to start. And it's usually with perhaps a little bit of trouble. I like to start out my scenes with, they've got a problem. Whatever that mini problem is, it's got to be solved.
Right.
Or it may be like Jim Butcher says, it may be the sequel. It may be the fallout from the previous scene involving that character.
Right. Yeah. Well, basically, even if you can basically throw in all this minutiae. Well, what if you're writing about multiple characters and multiple points of view? It doesn't matter. It's the same damn thing. It applies. It's just basically related pieces of information to describe what is going on at that second.
And it's still a micro arc. Whether you've got multiple points of view in this particular thing,
arcs.
Whatever you want to call it, it's still going to end up being, with multiple points of view, they're going to be related in some way or fashion. Otherwise, they're not going to be in that container together, because that's what a scene is. It's a container.
Now, one thing I'll also say is you and I pretty much do the same thing, which is a scene is usually tied only to one point of view. No head hopping.
Yes, because it's really hard to have a scene. Well, that's not true. You can, even though I don't do it, you can have head hopping and still be in the same scene as long as they're in the same place.
Right. But what I'm saying is, I think our usual modus operandi is to not do it.
It's because we're not Nora Roberts. We're not that good.
We're not Tolkien either. So, I mean, that's something I try and stay away from. And it makes it easier for readers to follow. When a scene, and I'm terrible at doing this because I want things to be all suspenseful and shit, but you try and establish in the scene who the hell's point of view we're in, unless there's a damn good reason not to. And at some point, even if you're trying to give us, this could be which of our three characters is in the prison because they just woke up here? Well, maybe you'll find out in the third sentence. But if it's important to know which one of them it is, you're going to have to tell us at some point. And you should try and establish that as early as possible.
You absolutely should.
Good reason for it. So that also is there to consider. Anyway.
So when you're putting together a chapter, does it have to have a specific number of scenes?
No.
How many scenes would you view as too many scenes?
Ask my editor.
I'm sure this is a painful lesson that you've been told in the past.
Fuck all of you people.
That's because you've written 10,000 word long chapters.
That is correct. I did. I sliced them up later.
Because you were told to.
Because I was told at gunpoint.
That's a really rough editor when they come armed to your house to go ahead and make you change that manuscript.
Right. Anyway, I would always separate scenes by the 5 asterisks, right? Separate scenes within a chapter. If a chapter goes long for me, it's usually I start kind of looking at it. Shut up, Terry. I start looking at it and giving it the stink eye around 3,000 words. That's when it's getting a little long for me, and I that's when I start giving it the stink eye, and I try and find a place to stop. Sometimes you can't.
It's true.
You can't kill the scene in the middle. It would make no goddamn sense. So you have to either find an arbitrary cutoff point, or you're going to have to insert one if you want to break that. If you want to break that chapter up so it doesn't become humongous.
I've heard in the past professionals say that you should aim for somewhere between 2,200 and 2,800 words in a chapter. I try to keep that in mind, but it's not a concrete rule for me. I've gone as low as 1,800 words. I've had chapters that are 3,800 words. So it's whatever it takes to be. But if it starts hitting 4,000, I'm looking for a place to cut. And if it's hitting the mid 3,000s, I'm giving it the squint eye.
I've had chapters that are 45 words.
Well, that's because Stephen King has infected you.
No, it's because I needed to get that one thing across, and there was no way to tie it to the previous chapter or the next chapter. There was nothing for it to attach to.
You know, I totally could see that in Andy Weir's The Martian. You know, he could have had a chapter that just said, fuck.
Actually, I think he did.
He may have. It would have been perfectly appropriate if he did.
I think
Chapter 17, fuck.
Well, and I also think he had like a one-sentence line. The other guy in the chat line reading is what he said, and the last thing he said was boobies.
Yes.
Everybody in the world is watching you. Oh, boobies. Yeah, good stuff. It's all variable. I think you should try and get consistency in your book as much as possible. But again, the rules, know the rules, break them when you need to. Don't break them just for no good reason. Break them for a reason.
The rules are that you can't have your chapter in general be too short because it makes the story choppy. You can't have them too long because it's almost like the wall of text if you have these endless chapters. But it doesn't mean you can't do those things. You just have to realize I'm breaking a rule when I do this. It has to serve a purpose.
Consequences.
There may be consequences, but it has to serve a purpose. Varying from the basic rules that sell these things. The reason you want a middle length chapter is because that's if you've got the readers trained that that's where they're going to fall, then they're likely to turn the page to the next chapter and read some more. You don't want to give them a place where they can set the book down and say, I'm done for now.
Yeah, I know this guy or this person writes, 8 pages a chapter. So all I got to do is get through those next 8 pages and I've got a chapter done. Oh, shit. No, I got to see how the next 8 pages go.
That's the goal. You want to have somebody flipping pages until it's 3 a.m. and they are cursing you to write this letter, how you have fucked up their entire workday.
Yeah, that should be your goal right there, is to get that person to just, that should be.
It's all a trick. This is all a trick. All of these structures are to tell an entertaining story in a way that keeps people reading.
Yeah. If you're writing genre fiction and you just want people to enjoy the hell out of it, that's what you do. That's what you do. That's how you do it. Those are the simple rules. Probably the best ones to follow when you're starting out. Don't aim to be a trailbreaker when you're trailblazer when you're starting out. Aim to be competent.
Here's a trick for you. Not a trick. It's just an insight for you. If you aim to be a trailblazer, you will never be a trailblazer. Because you're going to be following in the trail of everybody else that has actually been a trailblazer.
Yeah, just be
If you want to be a trailblazer, be yourself.
Just be you.
Be you.
Be you. Take all the rules, decide which ones to break, bend the other ones, and make that your voice. There you go. See, we should be charging for this. So easy. All right, that's chapters.
That's chapters. Sometimes when you put together a novel, you have these evil things called parts or sections.
Oh, my Lord. I'm going to call the census because he said we're going to talk about parts.
And this is definitely not pieces parts. It's definitely parts.
Pieces, parts, part 1, part 2, part 3.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay.
You don't get the whole pieces parts reference. It's a chicken thing. Never mind. Go on about your business.
I'm waiting for you to move on about these parts. What about these parts?
Have you ever written a story where you felt you need to segregate various sections of it to be the beginning, middle, and end, as in part 1, part 2, part 3, whatever? I've never really gotten the whole need to segregate a novel, but I've seen them done. So obviously other people feel that they're necessary.
I tried to do that with Derelict and I get yelled at. And the reason being is, and I kind of did it with the black books as well, where there was a definitive, we've set everything up, and then here is everything going haywire. Next part. Because it's almost like a self-contained arc.
It would have to be, because there's no reason to have a part.
Here are all the characters. I've got them all in place. The fire has started burning. Next.
If you were writing a post-apocalyptic stuff, you could have part 1 be the fall of civilization. Part 2 might be the immediate survival of the aftermath, and part 3 might be a year later. There has to be a reason to break them apart, or to not break them apart, to segregate them into these particular artificial things that are sections. I've never really got the whole need to do that, as I said, but maybe it's your thing.
I understand why some writers do it, especially if they're long-winded.
Wait a minute. Is that a flash of lightning I see outside your window?
Oh, shut up. Shut up. Excuse me. Especially if they're long-winded and can't shut the fuck up, and they want to tell you 50,000 words about this minor goddamn character.
Stephen King.
There may not be a reason to segregate, or there may not be a reason to segregate it as much. It gets kind of difficult unless you're falling into a routine. King has a routine, which is he breaks up those chapters with part 1s and all that stuff, because he's covering a specific time slot. Or it's almost like he follows the quest, the Joseph Campbell mentality of the quest. It has 5 definitive parts or whatever, and it follows. Here's part 1 of getting everybody together. Here's part 2 of them making the plan. Here's part 3, the actual quest. Here's part 4, the battle, and part 5 is the requiem for the battle, the denouement. Well, then it makes sense, because you may say you may call part 1 the gathering, and you may want to basically segregate it out for a very specific reason. And I'm not going to tell you that there isn't a good reason to do that. It's just some authors have definitely need it because of just how long the books are.
So that if you write that large enough, that could be the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
It's really one story told out over 3 books. And so each one of those books, the first is The Fellowship of the Ring. It's all about the fellowship.
It's getting the journey started.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Two Towers is meandering forever.
Lots of meandering.
And then the third book is, fuck it, we're tired of meandering. Let's get shit done.
Now we're going to kill some motherfuckers.
Now we're going to kill some motherfuckers. That's 3 parts. Derelict is 5 parts. It's getting to Mira, what happens on Mira and around Mira, what happens when they finally face the fact that they're totally screwed. 4th is coming home, and 5th is, I'm not going to say. But there are 5 distinct parts, even though it's the same story. And it's actually a very compressed story, because I think the actual time these bozos spend out of cryo, I think, is a total of 22 hours so far.
You really fucked those characters up.
Oh, in record time. I mean, it took so goddamn long. Anyway, the point is that it breaks them up into logical pieces. And it makes it easier to digest. And from a marketing perspective, it's better to sell 5 books than 1. But in truth, for me as a writer, I know I would never have gotten it done. And it would never be the story it was if I tried to put it all as one book.
Maybe having parts of a book is an element of scale. Maybe the reason that I don't particularly care for those things and don't understand them is I don't write long enough works to have parts.
It's just that the arcs are larger. There's basically that one arc that that takes place over 5 books. It's that one continuous arc, but each individual piece is an arc underneath it, and that's what we're really following.
But your overall overarching arc in that story is, oh shit, we're fucked.
Only in the third story. They don't realize just how boned they really are until the third story. They're like, okay, this is bad. This is very bad. We can fix this. Oh shit, we broke everything.
Try it now.
If you tried rebooting the universe,
try it now.
Try it now.
Jesus. I could totally see one of your Marines saying that.
Oh, I may have to put that in there. I could have Dickerson say that. It would fit perfect. It would fit perfect. Yeah,
okay.
It's just a different. It's just like saying season 1, season 2, season 3. You just need to put it in those parlances. Do you need that? Do you need that division? I would say if you're writing related stories, related stuff where you have those definitive marks, break those up into different books. Just do it. Just break them up.
We can't talk about chapters without talking about their ugly stepchildren, prologues and epilogues.
Oh, no. Prologues and epilogues. Terry is anti-prologue. Terry is anti-epilogue to a certain degree.
I'm absolutely not anti-prologue.
He is absolutely anti-prologue. And what he calls a prologue in this particular case is...
people put their chapter 1s as prologues.
All right.
That's what doesn't belong. Hang on, I'm going to get there. Let me explain. A prologue is absolutely appropriate if what you're putting in that prologue is separated by a great deal of time, involves different people setting up events that are going to become important in the storyline, and that sort of thing. If you're doing something that involves the characters that you already have, and it's right there at the same time frame, that's not a prologue. That's chapter 1.
Yeah, I agree.
If you want to look and see who does prologues well, Clive Cussler. He does excellent prologues because they are widely separated by time. They're widely separated by who's doing what, yet everything that happens in those prologues is key to what goes on in the novel. The novel could not be told without having that information in the reader's hands.
The plot exists because of this particular event or artifact or whatever that was made 5,000 years ago or whatever.
And if you're going to write something that has a prologue, it has to fulfill the same type of functions. It needs to be something that is divorced from the story that you're writing, yet it's key to what's happening. If you ever watch an episode of any crime drama ever, the very first scene is normal people doing something and either finding a dead body or getting murdered.
Yep.
That's a prologue because it sets up everything that comes after it. And it's divorced from that story that you're telling.
As opposed to a warm open, like you see with the TV shows where they show action before they run the credits, whatever that is. That's usually not necessarily a prologue because it's usually the characters that are in that segment are also in the same segment afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's different. It would still be a chapter 1.
Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at it like that, then you can tell what the difference between prologues and chapter 1 is. And if you know what the difference is, then you can tell if you actually need a prologue or you don't. If you don't need a prologue, you shouldn't use one.
Yep. Yeah. I've seen who was that? James Herbert in Moon, I think it was. He used the only time that we saw through the character's eye, or excuse me, from the villain's eyes, as it were, I think was at the very beginning. Was the only time we ever got her perspective on anything. And since we never really saw that again, we got that one slice of her. Pardon the pun if you know the book. And if you don't know the book, you should go read it. Just be aware it is a gore fest. It worked because the rest of the time from chapter 1 on, we're dealing with one character who's not that character. But they gave us a sign of what that character is doing, just like in some of the more popular movies. You see the scene of the crime through the killer's eyes, and then we never see the killer again until the end, where they're caught or faced or whatever. So same kind of thing.
If you look back at the movie Army of Darkness.
Why? Why would you look back at Army of Darkness? Why?
If I remember correctly, the opening segments of the movie are scenes that were filmed from the actual Evil Dead movies. That's a prologue. Because even though it's the same character, it's an event separated by space and time.
He's catching us up on what in previously in the Evil Dead series.
In a way that it's sort of that, but you can have a prologue with the same characters so long as it's a discrete element that directly informs what the entire rest of the story you're going to tell is about.
Okay.
You may not like the movie, but that's one way of doing it that's a different way of doing a prologue that I find as valid.
Okay, so, all right, that covers prologues. What about epilogues?
I'm not nearly as anti-epilogue as I am prologue. I think you need to have, it's okay to have an epilogue if you need to change what everybody has seen happen in the novel so far. It's like the after credit scenes in movies. You're watching your Marvel movie and then something happens in the after credit scene that changes your understanding of something that went on in the novel. So if you don't stay for the Marvel movie credits, you're making a terrible error.
I would say another reason why epilogues are absolutely vital or necessary as epilogues is when we have come to the end of the action of the story. We've wrapped everything up, but we can't really wrap everything up because we need to show something. We can't close the story for another 2 weeks or whatever. So 2 weeks of 2 weeks of time has passed. So now we've broken away from the main novel, and now we're in a different place. So yes, then an epilogue.
It's segregated by time.
Yeah.
So you've got to segregate it by time or space or characters. It's got to have some of that going on. The only time that I've used an epilogue is when I thought that the novel ended on kind of a high note, and I wanted to bring in some foreshadowing of what was coming next. So I picked some of the people they were going to have to deal with and had a couple of pages of epilogue, bringing them down, if you will.
The other way to use an epilogue and really use it is to switch to a character that wasn't in the book at all.
But it has to make sense.
But it has to make sense. It'd be kind of like, yeah, they blew up the monster or whatever else, and then the epilogue is some kid finding some piece of trash or whatever with a little piece of the blob or whatever creature it is on it.
It's like the original ending of Earth Core. He killed off all the main characters. The scenes afterward were somebody else.
This is true.
So that's, in a way, that's kind of an epilogue.
Yeah, it is, because it's the requiem. It's where we find out
how things shook out.
So to speak, yes. So that's where you want to use an epilogue. We agree on that.
So now we're looking at the story as a whole, whether it's a short story, whether it's a novel. What is important about having that self-contained unit of having a story? What makes it a story? No pressure.
Simplest definition: a beginning, a middle, and end. Simplest, easiest definition. Something happens, there's a result, or because here is something happens to that something, and then this was the result of that something happening.
Well, that's all we need to know about that subject. We're done. No, it is seriously. That seriously is, when you boil it right down, that's it. It's got to be a self-contained story. If you're one of those people that ends your story where things aren't resolved, at least most of the major things, then you've made a mistake. I've made that mistake before. Don't be Terry. Don't make that kind of mistake, because people will hate you for just putting a to be continued in the middle of your goddamn novel.
There is a reason why I am known as a cliffhanger and bastard. There's a reason why that term exists. It doesn't have necessarily anything to do with podcasts. That's just where it got done. It got abused to epic levels because we got to do that to people every single freaking week.
rather than doing it novel per novel. Because it's much more infuriating, I think, when every week you're like, God damn it, I gotta wait a week.
When you're serializing something like in a podcast, it's a lot of fun to just stick it to the person that's listening to it every single week and have them go, why do I put myself through this? Because I love it.
There's a certain joy in it, sadistic joy. Anyway, you're gonna get hate mail.
Yes, you are.
But again, if it's self-contained and really marks a change in the story, where the story's going as a whole, then you kind of got to do it. Unless you have time and you have the will and everything else to go ahead and write that next leg. And if that's the way you want to write it, then go write it that way. But I personally, as a reader, am going to see that and go, there really should be a part 2 here.
I made the utter mistake of having a story that was too large for the container that I wanted to put it in. And I ended up finding a convenient place to break it up between novels. And that was a mistake. That was a mistake as a storyteller that I regret making.
So you think it should have been one contiguous piece?
I think that I should have made a better arc that would contain that one novel. The stretch of getting to Terra ended up being 2 novels for those characters.
Right, yeah.
I should have had an intermediate goal that they had to achieve that one novel, to flow into the next one. And I didn't do it. And it was a terrible mistake on my part.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say that that's definitely one of the rules there. There has to be some demarcation, and leave them with some task that is yet unfinished, mainly because they haven't gotten to start it yet, but they know what the next task is. And then you move on from there. That's pretty much the only way you can break it up.
Yeah. So don't be Terry. Don't do that.
Be Paul. Do it intentionally and from the very beginning, because you know exactly what you're writing for the next 5 years. Yeah, that didn't happen that way.
That's only one book.
Once I realized I was in trouble there, that's when I was like, I got to cut it. I got to cut it, or this book's never going to get done. I can't write another 100,000 words for this right now. I can't do it.
Whatever you say, Brandon Sanderson.
Fuck off. Anyway, the rule is the simplest rules in the world. Try and make it contained. Don't try and trick your reader. Don't try and be cute. Tell a story. Get to the point. Make the story. Find your voice, and leave the reader feeling satisfied at the end, even if they're unsatisfied for other reasons.
If they're dissatisfied, you want it to be something you caused intentionally.
Right.
And you want it to be, you want the right kind of dissatisfaction too. You want them hungry for more, not the fact that they feel robbed because you didn't deliver.
Don't deliberately kill the character at the end for no fucking reason, just to be edgy.
Scott Sigler.
It's not edgy. You shut up. It's not edgy, especially not for short stories. There's a really short flash fiction piece on Pseudopod where guy breaks down. The cop finds him as a complete and total asshole, and basically blows the tires out in his car, gets in his cop car, and drives away. And then the guy who's out there alone on the rural highway begins to hear howls, and he can see the wolves things or whatever it is coming, their eyes glowing and everything else. He goes into the trunk, he grabs the crowbar, and that's the end of the story. Because
I'm sure it's all going to be fine.
It doesn't need to go any further. It really doesn't. You know what's going to happen. The guy's dead. And that was kind of the point of the story. Was that this happened. And the character has their fight, but we don't get to see the very end, because why? You just basically stop where it makes sense to stop with the character. The character is no longer thinking about telling a story. The character is no longer cognizant of anything. The character is about to get into mano a mano and get torn apart.
If you were going to have that kind of story and wanted to put something else after it, that would be a place for an epilogue where somebody's reading the newspaper about what's found after the fact.
That would be the cop coming back with a tow truck. for the
Yeah,
car.
that would. Well, I'm not sure that I would call that an epilogue, though. If you have someone else, like a tow truck driver, drive by and stop to look at the vehicle, that would be an epilogue. If the cop is just coming back, you're just continuing the story.
It depends. You just broke your own rule. In this particular story, the story is told by the driver of the car.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I can sort of see that. It's a place that doesn't really suit having an epilogue.
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky story. I mean, like I said, it was flash fiction. I think it was maybe 1,200 words. But the point is that's, or 1,000 words. The point is that is a case where you can do that, leaving them satisfied but dissatisfied at the same time. Because I wanted to know more. I wanted to know if the guy lived or died, but then I realized it really didn't matter because you know where the story's going to go anyway. There's no way out. There's no way out. He's not surviving it. So it was a good story for what it was. It really got you into it. It got really, really crazy, suspenseful at the end, and then you just realize the character is just foobarred.
Let's take it to the final step. Solo novel, trilogy, extended series.
Oh my God. Yes.
What do you have to keep in mind as far as putting together that kind of sort of story when you're telling it to fit into those types of arcs?
Oh, like I know what the fuck I'm doing.
Hey, that's why you're the host of this goddamn show. Of course you know what you're doing.
There are so many people who are like, you have no fucking idea what you're doing. And they're right. Standalone novel is you get a set of characters, they go through their journey, the journey ends, you never see them again. It's a standalone book.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there's a quote unquote sequel to that book, it can still be a standalone in the sense that
it may have different characters that are tangentially involved.
Or it could be the same characters after time has passed and it's a different problem. But related problem. Different but related problem.
The thing
Relic
with
and reliquary.
You can have a bunch of solo novels so long as they are attached by a central theme. Like Peter Klein's, his 14. He has other books in that universe, and the characters tangentially interact with each other. So you get to see the original characters from the book in the next book. They're involved in some way. So those are standalones, yet they're part of a whole.
Yeah, I think you pegged it. Those stories are in a universe. So they're a series of stories in a universe.
You don't have to have sequential stories always.
No.
You can be like Peter Klein's, and you can have something where the fomenting horror that's in another universe is the actual theme that connects all of these stories.
Yeah, that would be Lovecraftian.
It kind of was, actually.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I'm just saying it'd be Lovecraftian in nature. So those are solo novels. You write a solo novel, it's connected to nothing. It just tells the journey, and the journey's over. You may come back if you're smart. You'll leave some holes just in case you want to come back.
If you're really writing a Lovecraftian story, the story really is over.
Unless somebody comes to get the gibbering madman out of the cells later.
It's nothing but bones left. The horror's eating you. You're gone.
Oh, yeah. A great game called Darkest Dungeon. You should play it sometime. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, that's one set. And then you have a trilogy, which is three large movements to a symphony, right?
It's when your novel is just too many words to actually have in one novel.
Or
unless you're Brandon Sanderson.
Shut up. Unless you've got, the original trilogy for Star Wars. You got Star Wars, you got Empire Strikes Back, you've got Return of the Jedi.
Each of those are separate stories.
Separate stories, and yet they're part of a trilogy.
There's an overarching story arc.
Right. And the difference between that and Tolkien is, I would argue Tolkien's not really a trilogy because we more or less stay with these same characters the entire time, and things never stop. Whereas there do seem to be significant portions of the time between Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return.
And the characters reach a set of circumstances in those novels where they've achieved a level of completion.
Yeah, there's definitive movements to the piece. I mean, you can make the argument Tolkien is exactly the same way. Never mind, forget it. All right, fine. Tolkien's a
No, I think Tolkien
I'm
is
arguing
actually
with
one
myself.
story.
I'm arguing with myself in my head.
Well, you just keep arguing and let us know who wins when you're finally finished.
You don't want to know.
When you're looking at a large series, though, if you're one of these people like me that just wants to keep going in the story, you've got to have a canvas large enough to tell a big story.
And yeah, I've got to have characters interesting enough. But I mean, you're talking about James Bond, you're talking Clive Cussler, you're talking about the old men's adventure books, etc. Those are those kinds of stories. The characters, well, we've discussed this before too. The characters never really change.
Yes, well, that's what's make them different. That's why I was going to disagree with you and say that James Bond and Clive Cussler aren't really a series in the same way that I write a series.
Well,
my characters grow,
yeah,
and the plot line, that's for writing something like I do, where the characters continue to grow and the plot line continues to develop. You've got to have a different mindset than if you're writing something episodic like James Bond or Clive Cussler.
I would say episodic. That's how you know it's episodic. Each book is self-contained completely.
Murder mysteries. Murder mysteries are episodic to a very great degree.
Yeah, even if the character grows a lot, it's still episodic.
There was the author that did the alphabet novels, which sadly she passed away before she could finish Z. But
did she get to Y, or
yeah,
she get to
Y was published. She was in the process of trying to do Z when she passed away. Sue Grafton was her name.
Grafton, yeah, I got 25.
And her character, Kelsey Milhone, did develop as the stories went along, but they were definitely episodic.
And you could pick up anywhere in any of them.
And you would not be there. You would not be like one of my readers who sent me a note asking me something about one of the details that they didn't recognize the name to something and said, yeah, I was just reading your latest novel. I haven't read, all of them in order or anything. So what is this? I'm like, what?
We talk about that on book 3 on page 167, paragraph 5, word 3, which says the.
My series is the one that builds on itself as it goes along. So if you've not been following along, you may be a little lost if you miss a book.
Yeah, if you jump into the black, you can jump into the black anywhere. You cannot do that with Derelict. You will be so fucking lost because there's no good way. It's impossible.
If you're doing episodic, then you don't have to worry about the readers getting lost if they start on a different book. If you're doing an actual series, yikes, that's a totally different issue.
I would put one counter to that, which was, what did you say? And now what did I say? I was going to say, so long as you remember to remind readers who may have not read who may have jumped through the series about something that you're going to reference, exactly what that is, and not just throw the reference out.
If you're going to touch something in the past, you probably should put a little context in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't have enough context in that reference because the reader was like, what?
Right. So that is one of the rules too, is it makes it a little bit easier. You want to be able to, when I write Derelict, I want a reader to be able to come in who's read the previous book and for me to remind them who everybody is. I want to be able to basically put that at the front of the book. All right, I know you haven't read in a year. Here's who everybody is again. Here's where we are. Let's get moving. But if you are a new reader to Derelict and you do not start with book 1, there is no way you will ever be able to figure out what the hell is going on. No way. You'll be lost. So that's one of the challenges you have if you split up one story into multiple books.
Yeah.
And you publish them over time instead of having them, come out so they can binge them.
One of the benefits, though, of writing books in a series is that it's difficult in the beginning, but after you get a long ways, the story has a momentum of its own.
I think what I've heard over and over again is that there is a new series out. People generally won't even, well, people in certain science fiction circles, at least, or fantasy, won't touch it till they see 3 books.
Yeah, there's some people that won't read anything until they've seen that it's a completed series. Which
And
good luck
there
on
are
good luck starting David Weber's Honor Harrington series if that's the case.
Good luck starting Jim Butcher.
Yeah,
in Dresden.
you heard that they've scheduled the next book in that, Peace Talks, July 14th.
July 14th. Oh God, I got to read like 7 books to catch up.
Catch up, buddy. Here's your wake up call.
Oh, it's gonna hurt. Anyway, those are things you have to think about, or you may not think about. I pantsed my way through Derelict. It took me 1 book to figure out what the hell it was I was trying to write, and by that time, it was too late. I was just screwed. And I don't recommend doing it that way. But like I said, it would never have worked otherwise. I by force gumped my way into a series. And I kind of did the same thing with The Black. I had no intention for that being a series.
The plot is like a box of chocolates.
I ain't never know what you're going to get. Yeah, there's a certain madness to this. This is why everybody freaked out when I started calling Arrival and Outbreak Periquels. Well, what the fuck else do you call them? Well, you try to explain it to people, and they're like, so it's a story that takes place at the same time as the other story because of the previous story, and the timelines greatly overlap, but totally different characters. Yes, that's Periquel. The fuck's the problem? Why is it so hard to understand? And they're like, did you plan it this way? You're a genius. No, I'm an idiot.
No, you're a trendsetter.
I left open a loophole and then realized there was no possible way I could let that loophole stand without investigating it. And that led on to 2 more books. So there you go. That's how that happened. So yeah, we break our own rules. We know what's best for us. It doesn't mean we're going to do it.
Here's a lesson for you folks. You don't learn from your successes. You learn from your failures.
I should be an expert by now.
Because you sure as hell won't remember the things you did right. You'll remember the things you did wrong.
Page 167, paragraph 4 of book 1. Big mistake. I'm not even going to say which book.
Everybody, go do your research. Figure out where that is.
All right, we're getting loony. Go ahead and end this shit.
Well, folks, if you'd like to go ahead and send us a note talking about your favorite parts of the story, whether it be a word, whether it be a scene, whether it be a chapter, or the massive series that you intend to write, send us a note at show@deadrobotsociety.com. You can find Paul on Twitter at Paul_E_Cooley. You can find us on Facebook at the Listeners of the Dead Robots Society Facebook group. If you want to go ahead and find us and see our ugly mugs, you can find us on youtube.com/DRS podcast. We have to thank the good folks at podhoster.com for hosting all of the audio for you folks that are wise enough not to want to look at our faces. And if you would like to support this show where you could give us a little bit of extra oomph to make it go, you could go to patreon.com/DRS podcast, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get exclusive content, such as our $10 supporters get with having their names read at the end of every show.
And our unlucky $10 subscribers are Patreon supporters. You poor people. You need help. They are Andrew Smallwood, J.D. Barker, Tony L. Joy, Veronica Jaguar, Kelson, Isabel Cushy, Rick Shaw, Lisa Slack, Nathan Cosby, Cheryl Winters, Tracy Bodine, Devin Lee, Drew Bernardi, Chris Winder, and of course, J.R. Hanley. Thank you.
You're going to have to kill him again. He's been around so long, you just need to kill him again.
I have never killed him.
What?
I have never killed him.
You should. Join the club. Everybody should kill J.R. Hanley.
Oh, goody. On that note.
On that note, folks, we're out of here.
All right. Have a good week, folks.
Bye-bye.